Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's special council meeting on December the 11th, 2023. Individuals interested in participating in this meeting were eligible to register online using the delegation registration form at www.kitchener.ca/delegation or via email at delegation@kitchener.ca. Any written comments received prior to the start of this meeting have been circulated to members of council and will form part of the public record. The meeting live stream and archive videos are available at www.kitchener.ca/watchnow. Before we begin this afternoon's meeting, I'd like to acknowledge that this afternoon we're gathering on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We recognize our responsibility to serve as stewards for the land and honor the original caretakers who came before us. Our community is enriched by the enduring knowledge and deep-rooted traditions of the diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Kitchener today. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, there being none, and there being no delegations, we'll move into item 4.1, which is the Phase 1 report and guiding principles for the Kitchener Utilities Transition Strategy, and we will turn it over to Kate Daly to begin things. Welcome, Ms. Daly.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having us today. I'm delighted to be here on behalf of the project team to share our Phase 1 findings. The focus of the project, of course, is to develop a Kitchener Utilities clean energy transition strategy, and through that we're working to evolve our business to continue to be financially successful and provide value services throughout the energy transition. There are 3 phases of the project, and we've been focused on Phase 1 in this first year. And that first phase is really about inviting people into a problem-solving conversation with us, about getting everyone on the same page so we can have more detailed conversations in Phase 2 about what options are available to us. I don't have enough hands for both clicking and page turning. So we've engaged with customers and the public, stakeholders, city committees, council, and staff. And a key tool we've relied on to do deep engagement, I'll highlight now, is in-depth workshops. These ranged in lengths from 3 hours with stakeholders to 1.5 hours with the public. And we did that to make space for people to consider some of the different aspects of a really complex topic. For customers in the public, we did 2 workshops with people who signed up out of interest, but we also did 2 other workshops with people who were recruited by an agency to be demographically representative of the community. And this gave us a broader range of participants than we would usually see and some really rich conversation. We also had a survey on Engage, as well as information materials, and held drop-in sessions and various meetings, as you can see. So with respect to all the different groups we engaged with, there were 6 themes that really came throughout those conversations, and those are outlined in much more detail, of course, in attachment A to your report. But those themes were cost and affordability, reliability, change broadly, KU as a business, information, education, and awareness, and trust and responsibility. You can see some of the sub-themes on the slide as well that emerged under each of those. So the question really is, how do we take what we've heard and what we've learned and turn it into action as the project moves forward? So to do this, we developed a set of guiding principles to steer us through future phases of the project. Those are discussed in detail in attachment B. And there are 4 guiding principles. Each one is accompanied by an intention and 3 objectives. And of course, all of these guiding principles are in the context of the work we're doing to evolve our energy business, to continue to be financially successful and provide valued services. So the first guiding principle focuses on Kitchener Utilities as a business, and for that, we will make responsible, accountable, and financially rewarding business decisions. Our intention there is really to work to responsibly position our community-owned utility for success as things change around us. And the 3 objectives under that guiding principle are around following sound business practices, taking action quickly to manage risk and maximize opportunity, and to assess value holistically to find our best contribution. The second guiding principle really focuses on our customers, and so we'll serve customers as an affordable and reliable partner in the energy transition. Our intention there is to work to empower customers and community members as their trusted partner in this work. And those objectives focus on pursuing affordable, reliable, and predictable energy services, empowering customers with choice and with trustworthy, accessible information, as well as bringing people along as things change more broadly. The third guiding principle focuses on those broader community goals that the city has and that come through our community-owned utility as well. For that, we will contribute to a thriving community, and our intention is to work to make the community even stronger. Specific objectives there are to collaborate with partners, do our part to address climate change, and use clear metrics and align them with community scale goals. Now, of course, there are things we know and there are things we don't know about what our energy system will look like in the future. So the fourth guiding principle is really about preparing for the different ways our energy system could change. And so we will plan for multiple energy futures with flexibility and focus. And our intention there is to prioritize solutions that can adapt to and provide value in all different energy futures. Specific objectives there are to rely on safe bet technologies and prepare for long shot technologies, as well as preparing for a broad range of net zero carbon futures, and more broadly, iterating, experimenting, and learning as part of our approach. So taken together, these guiding principles and the more specific objectives with them are how we want to take what we've learned and act on it. And this is really the guiding light for the work that comes next as we gear up for looking at specific options in phase 2. Thanks very much.
Is that it for the presentation? Okay. You were good. Because, I mean, this is a lot of material that you had to cover off in that. And I know a lot of work that went into this to get us to this point. We do have several sets of questions. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Vermanovic, and thank you for the report. Very thorough as always and excellent work. I guess my one question is, and we may be hearing this throughout the community, is how do we respond to individuals that say we're not changing our switching to our natural gas soon enough? So how do we counteract that?
Who wants to take that? Yep, and if both of you can just turn on your mics, you can leave them on.
Thanks for the question. It's a very thoughtful one through you, Chair, of course. I think one of the things that I really appreciated about this engagement opportunity was the ability to sit down with, particularly through those recruited workshops, people who had not really thought about this in depth before. I spend a lot of time talking to people who think about this a lot. And kind of watching them take those kind of first early steps through thinking about some of this. And for some of them, we heard a lot of those kind of different pieces coming through. I think as we all have them, you know, we know that there's a serious environmental impact that our current energy systems have and that we play a part of that, but we also have lots of other constraints on our lives, and it can be difficult to kind of reconcile the different pieces. So I think that was a big theme we see coming through. And so part of my response to that is to say there are times when you can't kind of get to the next 10 words, so to speak, of the conversation. We really try to build into the engagement what people say after the first thing they say. And I think what we learned is that setting up kind of group conversations around some of these helps people to start thinking about the system a little bit. And for some people, their initial reaction is, we've got to do everything right now. And for some people, it's, I will not change under any circumstances. But most people, we've been finding that we've been talking to, can have a more nuanced conversation. And I'm hoping that's what we've set up for the second phase.
Okay. I guess my other question, too, would sort of, to follow up with my first, is there's really not a definitive alternative source of energy right now that's got commercial, you know, I guess a commercial experience, like, for lack of a better word, like durability and, you know, used, and that there's some value that we could adopt it because it's been in use for some time. So it's the reliability of it all is, I guess, my concern. So
Through you, Chair, thanks for that. And yeah, I think the objective that speaks to sort of safe bets versus long shots is really critical for what you're saying. That's a categorization the Canadian Climate Institute used in a report a couple of years ago, and I find I rely on it a lot myself. Safe bets being those technologies that are increasingly available, don't face any major barriers to widespread implementation, things like EVs and heat pumps that we know are building out quickly. But there are also those technologies that are long shots, things like distributing a lot of hydrogen through pipes, for example, which we're not currently doing, and we may be able to do, but we don't know yet whether that will be scalable. And so part of the challenge we have is we really need to build a plan on those safe bets to say what are the things we know play a role in all these different net zero futures because they're ready to do so. But we also need to prepare for some of the long shots because some of them have to pan out from a climate perspective, from an energy perspective, but we don't know which yet.
Okay, so you're saying fusion isn't ready yet?
I am not the expert on that, but I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, when the time's appropriate, I'm prepared to move the recommendation.
Thank you. I'll come back to you. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor Inet has touched on part of the question I wanted to ask is, how could we speed up? At the same time, well, ask that question, it may sound a bit contradictory, but it's not meant to be. Also, how do we maintain the importance on valuation of Kitchener Utilities? I know the effort is to do good through this endeavor and looking at the general transition from natural gas, but at the end of the day, we have a significant fiduciary responsibility to our taxpayers and our residents who benefit by this utility that's owned by them at the same time as a valuation in the future as well.
Thank you for the question through you, Chair. I think that's one of the key things that really came through in our conversations with the community, with stakeholders, with councillors as well, is the importance of thinking of Kitchener Utilities and our energy businesses within the city as businesses. And I think that's where you see the first guiding principle really being focused on that. We recognize that what we need to accomplish needs to work from a business perspective, while also considering some of these other context pieces and other kinds of value given the city's vantage point. But it is one of those, I think, seeing through the recommended guiding principles, you see we kind of have to hold all of these things at the same time. And that can be challenging, but it's also part of, I think, why this first phase has been really important to help prepare people for having a thoughtful, nuanced assessment of our options while also having that business rigor.
So I ask this question because I think there's a certain approach that can be also taken where you have a successful business, such as Kitchener Utilities is, and that transition can be to strengthen the financial position of the organization in a future outward perspective, right? And we'll be seeing the energy transition and change throughout the markets, while taking care of the low-hanging fruits that can improve the financial viability. Then we can take those long shots. And we can take some risks without jeopardizing the future prospect, the business prospect of the enterprise. Is that our approach? And can we look at it that way also?
I think from my perspective, and I'm happy for others to weigh in, I think that some of those kinds of considerations are part of what, for me, comes through these objectives especially, because there are different kinds of trade-offs, right? And there's different kinds of almost balances to a portfolio that need to work. We have kind of a current portfolio that's been based on current and past energy systems. And as we look at what kind of mix of business arrangements are the right mix moving forward, we do have to consider pieces like what can we rely on, how much risk is involved for how much reward, what kinds of reward, all those sorts of pieces. So I think, while I might not have framed it exactly as you did, I think those sorts of considerations are absolutely top of mind.
I don't think I can frame it better than you, but I think you answered it. I think there's a comment in that question that there's a lot that we could do in the low-hanging fruit initially, that can better our financial position. And again, if you show us the money, we can go and take some risks with that money as well, right? The other question is about money. Available funding from higher orders of government, especially from the federal government. I know that sometimes public entities don't necessarily get the max benefit. It's more the private enterprises. Would we be looking at collaboration and even potential partnerships where the partnership is driven by the availability of government funding that's available now? And there's a two-ended question. Timing is important. Timing is important because, again, we may have a government that may be more intensely driven to provide funding for, environmental considerations. So should we be more proactive? Thank you.
Oops, thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the report. I too had concerns about the timing of things. 2025 seems like a long time away. But I had some questions beyond that. And first of all, there's reference to the Greener Homes Grant in the article, and I understand that's only available to Enbridge customers. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, my understanding is that the grants are available in a larger amount to Enbridge customers because Enbridge also contributes some of their conservation demand management program funding that they're required to provide by the Ontario Energy Board into kind of topping up federally available funds. Currently, those funds are, that kind of core funding minus the Enbridge portion are available to our customers as well.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I also wanted to ask you, we've set a goal of 50% reduction of greenhouse gases by 2030. And do you feel that we're on target for that goal? I know there's reference to the 2050 goals, like the year 2050. And the 50% by 2030 is mentioned, but do you think that's still a reasonable ask?
Through you, Chair, I think what I'd say in response to that is it's a big consideration, right? These goals, I think, are becoming very apparently more urgent as we go through every wildfire season. At the same time, I think your full question is a bit beyond the scope of our work with this project and certainly beyond the scope of my work with the project. At the same time, I think I do see great interest and great energy in this community for a lot of this work. We certainly, again, from some of the folks who don't think about this all the time, heard them getting to a place of curiosity about what they might do or contribute or what opportunities there might be for them. And at the same time, too, I think we're seeing some signs on the international stage that considerations around a lot of the technical pieces, so things like electric vehicles, et cetera, are really starting to have increasing market drives behind them. And I think we're probably headed in that direction with some other technologies as well. And so it's not exactly an answer to your question, but what I think it is to say is that there is a lot that can be done between now and 2030, locally and at different scales. And I think we're eager to see how Kitchener Utilities within its current business and future business opportunities can do its part to address climate change.
Okay, thank you. Another question has to do with a just transition. Has there been thought put into how we're going to ensure that those that work in the gas industry right now are going to be retrained or brought forward as things change and as we transition away from fossil fuel energy sources?
Through the chair. There I am. Thank you. Through the chair, as through this discussion with our staff, we've noticed that we do have the skill set right now with our current staff, and we believe that during, as people age and get out of the workforce, that they'll be able to, come out of the gas industry. And then we believe that there will be additional resourcing needed as we change to different technologies as well. So we'll be able to bring on and train and adapt to our current skill set of well-trained staff.
Okay. Just my final question has to do with the fact that I understand the province is in the process of building three new fossil fuel plants. How does that factor into the Kitchener Utilities plan? Like, is that going to be a problem? Is that going to impact the direction we're hoping to go in here?
So, through your chair, I can say with a bit of perspective on the Transform WR strategy, when that model was built, it was built on the assumption that the emissions factor from electricity would increase the way the IESO predicted back in sort of the 2020 timeframe. Since then, conversations have certainly accelerated on the importance of kind of addressing emissions from electricity. You're right that there are some policy complexities and sticking points that are being worked out right now. I think I got an email shortly before the meeting started also on new wind and solar procurement in Ontario, and so I think a lot is changing right now. But the good news is that the modeling that we had done locally assumed that emissions per kilowatt hour would increase, and so what was kind of scoped out for local action included things to sort of compensate for that. If electricity is able to decarbonize quickly, then that makes other kinds of changes easier. But I think there's certainly lots of opportunity within the existing provincial framework for local work, including that I think KU will be looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Most of my questions have been answered, but just wanted to follow up on the provincial impact. It is referenced in the report about the policy responsibility, and I'm not sure necessarily if it's a question for you, Ms. Daly, but has there been any indication from the province in terms of looking at the antiquated building code and changes there? Because in the report it does outline Vancouver's model, for example, and other parts of the world where there's, like a maximum energy envelope for new builds. So I guess two questions. Is there any indication from the province they're going to be visiting this? And if not, are we aware of any advocacy measures outside of what we might be looking at?
I might, through you, Chair, defer to Mr. Reedman primarily, but what I will note is that my understanding is that there are some changes afoot, which I know Mr. Reedman's staff explained much better than I do, related to the relationship between the federal model building code and the various provincial building codes as a result of requirements of international treaties that have changed of late. And so my understanding is that there's a move in some of the federal building code work towards some of those net zero considerations, and I think there's a lot of work underway with the provinces figuring out what that looks like in their contexts. But I know there's also some local considerations, so I'm not sure if anyone else has anything to add.
Is that it, Councillor Davey?
Yeah, and actually, I guess I just ask you, Mr. Mayor, if you're aware of any of the municipal groups out there. There's any advocacy? I know we have lots of other challenges with homelessness, et cetera, but are there groups out there lobbying for changes to the building code that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of anything right now. I think a lot of the focus right now is on the broader infrastructure programs, climate adaptation and mitigation funding federally, and so on, and that's been the focus of FCM's asks, and both in the lead up to the recent fall economic statement, and more importantly into the 24-25 budget that'll get tabled next spring.
Okay, no, that's helpful. I think it's something we should maybe keep our eye on as well, because it does seem like I've always believed in changing policy and letting the market figure out the solutions. So something we're going to look at for advocacy later on.
Okay. Point taken. We'll note that as we continue to look at our advocacy priorities for next year. I just had one question, and it's kind of been touched on already when we've talked about a few of the various issues that have come up. But it would seem that there are some vulnerabilities here in our work based on policy decisions that might be made by the other orders of government, both provincial and federal. So whether it's, looking at things like, some peak plants that might deal with things, or, if there was at a future federal election a change in government. I mean, we know that there may be some changes in priorities. Are we in our work factoring in what that might look like and how that might impact directions that we go, or the timing of directions, based on decisions that are made by other orders of government, or are we sort of purely looking at this in the context of we're going to do what's right for us, and go from there? So I don't know who wants to tackle that.
I think through you, Chair, what I'd say is that, as we look at those different energy futures, some of the variables that are important are about these various, provincial, federal, international considerations. They are going to change over time because this is such a long-term strategy piece. We're looking, in the near term, but also, a couple of decades out. And so, the short answer is yes, of course, we'll want to consider how various existing policies or changes to policies would affect our current business, as well as other business opportunities we might want to pursue. But I think, some of those pieces are, some of the key impetus actually for the work is to say, what regulatory risks do we have based on the way things could change? And so I know the team is keeping a close eye on developments in the gas industry, in kind of the energy transition, and that's certainly, considering how that plays in, is going to be a really big piece, I think.
Okay, great. Those appear to be all the questions that we have. So with that, Councillor Ioannidis, you wanted to move this? Seconded by Councillor Singh. Councillor Ioannidis, you want to make some comments?
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment. I really appreciate where this is coming from. I think we do need to, move forward with making changes with how we deliver our energy and be more safe with our environment. But at the same time, we have to be sure that we're using proven technologies and move forward that will not put our organization at risk. And I think Kitchener Utilities has, as is stated in the report, has a long history of energy and innovation through change for many, many years, and I really do appreciate the perspective and the commitment that staff have put forward too. So I think this is really excellent work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Singh?
Yeah, just very quickly, I think through my questions I did make some comments. I just want to touch on some of them. I think it's important to focus or aim towards resilience. And I think the strategy so far in the phase one does really commit to that as a driving force. But addition to the resilience, I think it's also being innovative. I think there are technologies that are emerging at the moment, as well as as they will come. Again, this should be a 20-year objective, right? How do we, transform the utility in a way that it's always nimble enough to quickly leverage on the changing technologies? We all grew in a time where there were like huge gaps in between major transitions for, technology. Now, every year there's something different that we wouldn't have visioned different, otherwise. So change and transition in a way that we are nimble. That would be my lasting comment. Thank you.
Okay. And I too would just like to add my thanks to, I know a number of staff have been involved in bringing this report to us. The utility and our customers have been, the utility's been highly valued by our customers for many, many decades, and I think we as a city have obviously valued the relationship with our customers over that same time period. I remember the various, some of the nostalgic ad campaigns that we've run over the years. And, you know, there was a lot of pride by Kitchener residents, and I think some of that came out in the work that staff have done in getting the report to the point that it is. And so as we look forward, we need to make sure we do it in a way that maintains that, but also brings forward and focuses on the principles that are identified. So it has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next, we have caucus on 2 items. So somebody want to move that? Moved by Councillor Singh, seconded by Councillor Davey. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And I don't believe I need to do 3 readings, right? Because we'll do that tonight. Okay, so with that, motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor O'Dooney, seconded by Councillor Johnson. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.